Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Descriptive List launch for the 2026 Descriptive List today on the 27th of November 2025. I'll trust that everyone's able to hear me unless I gain a message through from the team saying there's a problem. The chat's disabled for this meeting, but the Q&A is open and we'll take any questions at the end for either myself or my colleague Roger Vickers, who is also present to deal with any more market questions at the end of the talk. But in this talk today, we're going to go over the newly released varieties onto the descriptive list for the coming year, and a few of their highlights and a bit of discussion of the season in general. So without further ado, I know a few people are trickling in, but they'll hopefully just pick things up. We'll move on to what you're all here for. So on the descriptive list today, we're going to be talking about the winter beans, then the spring beans, then the combining peas, and looking at what new candidate varieties have been successful and moving onto the list. But also the list is a sort of a living list where other varieties that have been dropped and are no longer supported by the breeders may have also left compared to last year's list. So it's really reflecting what is currently going to be available and of interest in the coming year. So today we are announcing that there is 2 new winter bean varieties, 2 new spring bean varieties, and 7 new varieties in peas. So 2 of these are the Marifats, 3 green peas, and 2 yellow peas, all entering the list. Size-wise, there's minor differences. We've been using broadly the same operators, but exact field locations move between years. But hopefully you can see there that we've got a real spread across the country to be hitting different soil types and covering the major pulse growing areas across the UK. So for the descriptive list, we use a 5-year data set. So the oldest data currently being used is now from 2021, going forward to 2025. New candidates on the list will often only have 3 years of data, their first year on the descriptive list as a candidate, and 2 years from their VL trialing. But in general, established varieties have the full 5 years, and this becomes a rolling data set that as each new year is added, the data from 6 years ago is no longer considered. So it's live and updated about the reflection of how things have been in recent seasons. So across the country, we target having 6 winter bean locations, 10 spring bean and 7 pea. And this year, as I'm sure a lot of the people viewing this know, has been a tricky year with lots of drought and struggling conditions, particularly in the spring. So due to that, there have been some site losses. And so we've lost around 2 sites for each crop. But this is the reason that we do so many in the first place, so that we're still confident in the data that we're presenting, even if there has been an issue at some locations. We would always very much want to review, inspect, validate all sites. So all sites are inspected by me, or data is reviewed by external statisticians, and then the data is also considered in a meeting with the plant breeders to make sure that we're only including data that we have a lot of confidence in. So straightforward onto the winter beans now. So we have the following varieties with the full 5 years in the data set, being Vesper, Vincent, Norton, Ninja, all by Sonova, and LG Arctic and Tundra from Limogran UK, and then Miro being a new variety from Sonova with only 4 years of data, and then the 2 new varieties at the bottom, highlighted in red, being Patagonia and Hepworth. So I'm going to be showing you a lot of similar graphs to this today. So where the bars are showing yield, and that's percentage of control yield, where the control is set by all of the varieties that have 4 and 5 years of data, so not the new ones, are averaged to form the control value of 100, and then yields are compared statistically relative to that. Dots on the graphs will change bearing on the slide, In this case, for the winter bean, the dots are earliness of maturity. So you can see the range of yields there and the range of maturities displayed over the graphs. So to highlight up, these are the two new ones, Patagonia and Hepworth, and you can see where they're falling on a yield point of view and for their maturity dots at the same time. So the thing to note here is that Patagonia is a very early maturing line. You can see there that dot being a score of 8, showing its suitability for the regions of the country where maturity is a really important trait, where harvesting and getting it off the field in a timely manner is important, and you can compare it to other early maturing lines like Ninja there with a maturity of a 7. Looking at downy mildew now, the dots have changed to being downy mildew, the bars are all still yield, and would highlight out that Patagonia also has this rating of an 8 on a 1 to 9 scale for downy mildew, with Vincent being sort of second with a score there of 7, and they're both highlighted up in gold for you to be able to see. Hepworth then, so the dots have now changed on this graph to being rust scores, and you'll see there looking across that most varieties have a score of 5 on the 1 to 9 scale for rust, with Vincent having a 4, and the new variety Hepworth being the most rust resistant with a score of 6. Obviously, rust resistance is an important trait in winter beans. Just want to also put up some protein data for the winter beans, where you see that in general proteins for winter beans are around the 26% mark, but I've highlighted up both Patagonia and Ninja as having over 27. And so in general, thinking about the winter beans, you have thinking about the established ones that have already been on there a while. Vincent and Vesper continue to be the top 2 on the list. They've both performed well for a long time and continue to be good options for people considering winter beans. So this is how the list looks, and this is available now live on our website that you can click and look at the lists at your leisure. The recording of this video will also be up there later. But also this is then now available in the Pulse magazine as well. On to spring beans. So a slightly longer list here to look at, of which we have the following lines with 5 years of data being included, this being Navara, Futura, Genius, Lynx, LG Raptor, LG Viper, LG Stego and LG Hawk, and then Nautilus, LG Ego, Ketu and Loki with 4 years of data in the data set. And then the 2 new ones are Callus and Medeiros from Sartan Union and NPZ respectively. We still have an option in the Black Highland beans of Mara Speed. This is a very old and well-established variety covering its own niche trade. So moving on to looking at the data. So again, bars shown are yield and dots will vary slide by slide. And what we're talking about currently, if we're just having a broad general look over the spring beans, the dots are in black. And you can see that we've got a nice range of yield and fairly similar maturities for most things. I would point out that at the top end of the list, you have Nautilus and LG Eagle being the top 2 highest yielding, and that we've got 4 LVC varieties noted next to their names below, and I'll explain more about that in a minute. So highlighting the 2 new ones, you've got Callus and Medeiros, and both of them are these LVC lines. So this means low Viting convisine, and it means that they're more suitable for animal diets, that they have less anti-nutritional factors and can be often included in animal feeds at a higher ratio. And so there's a real sort of sub-niche within the spring beans of the LVC lines in comparison to the main material. So this is just the 4 LVC lines highlighted up. And we've changed the dots now to be downy mildew. And you can see that the new variety Madeiras, as an LVC line, has the best disease rating compared to the other LVCs. The other three LVCs all have a downy mildew rating of a 4, and it has a downy mildew rating of a 6. So within the LVC lines, it's the more disease-resistant option. Callus, on the other hand, is also the new LVC, and it is slightly higher yielding and further to the left on the graph than the established LVC lines of Ketu and Futura. So there's Madeiras highlighted up so that you can pick out that downy mildew score more. The thing I would say in general, obviously, is that new candidate lines are often still being commercialized and multiplied. So if you are really keen on trying LVC lines in the coming spring, it may be harder to get hold of Callus and Madeiras unless you get a multiplication contract for them, or the limited amounts that the breeders will be pushing this year. And thus Ketu and Futura still remain as good options for LVC if you don't manage to get hold of one of the new ones. So looking at downy mildew resistance in general, not just within the LVC lines, Maris Bede, as its sort of niche variety, has very good downy mildew resistance with a score of a 7, and LG Viper is very resistant in general with its score of an 8. It has for several years now been consistently the most disease-resistant spring bean line. Speaking of which, moving on to rust on spring beans rather than downy mildew, we've got a general range of 4s, 5s, and 6s in general, with LG Viper standing out again as the most resistant with a score of a 7. So we'd also point out, if you're not growing LG Viper, Loki and Navara are the two that have a 6. So again, looking at proteins, and the thing that stands out here is Maris Bede, again for that sort of niche pigeon trade. It's got that 29.7, so that's a really high protein amount for pulses in general. And so if you're not involved in the niche part of the market that's looking at Maris Bede, I've highlighted up 3 here in silver that are sort of the higher of the standard spring beans with scores above 28%. These being the new variety Callus, LG Stego, and LG Viper. But a lot of the varieties are all very similar, around 27%, and that still is often enough protein for most purposes. So zooming in then to the spring bean list in general. So this is what the full list looks like. It has extra information I've not shown, such as information on the straw length, information on the 1,000 seed weights, information on standing ability. So would encourage people to look up the full list rather than just consider what's highlighted in this talk. Moving on to peas then, and there's more to look at here. There's lots of pea varieties, so we'll deal with them colour by colour to a degree. So we have the yellow peas here with 5 years of data for Chameleon, LGIX and Batiste, and 4 years for Concerto, Orchestra, KWS Bram, Marla, Nos Blondie, Belair, LG Corvette and Bonham, and then the new varieties being KWS Telegram and Kushla. Also, we have 5 years of data now for the pink pea flamingo. The thing that I would say here is also just to clarify, things with 4 years of data in the database aren't necessarily all new lines from last year. There can be times where people have issues supplying seed to the trials, or there is just generally seed quality issues that involve a variety missing a year. So not all of them in that year 4 category are new lines out last year, but they may have had to lose a year's worth of data for some reason. So some of them are more well established in the market already than others. Moving on to the greens. So again, with 5 years of data, we have Greenway, Cactus and Butterfly, Mika, KWS, Gotham and Carrington. And then with 4 years of data, Blue Time, Reacher and Pangaea. And with 3 years, LG Aviator, Prophet and Daytona. And the new ones, KWS Arkham, Bullet and LG Mamba. Again, just highlighting something up here as well. Obviously, 3 of those is 3 years of the new lines shown in red, And the other three are ones, again, have either had a seed supply issue at some point, or, such as Prophet and Daytona, they're ones that have gone into limited trialing. So limited trialing is a thing for the oldest lines on the list that we've been testing for the longest period to keep the trial size from ballooning and making sure we've got lots of space for as many new candidates as possible. We move lines into being tested only 3 years out of 5 to keep their data fresh and leave more space in the trials for new lines. So that is the case with Prophet and Daytona there. Onto the maples, again with only 3 years because of this limited trialling scheme. We've got Mantara and Rose, no new maples for a while, but they are being worked on. And Marifats, we have Sakura, Octavia, Takayama and Vision, it's 5 years. Midori and Akuma with 4, and then 2 new lines in Yoshi and Nyx from NPZ and Elsons. So this next slide is going to be very busy because there's so many Ps, but I just wanted to present them all in the full context of each other, and then I'll break it down into smaller subgraphs afterwards. So no dots on this to keep it less busy, but you can see all of the yellows there, then the pink P flamingo, all of the greens, then the 2 maples, and the Marifats in the sort of tealy colour. Just to give a show of the yield range in general. And again, these yields are done as a percentage of the 4 and 5 year varieties, but that is across all of the types. So the 4 and 5 year Marifats are part of the yield comparison for the yellows and greens. All the Ps are looked at as the same control basket rather than being done per type. Highlighting up the new ones in red, you can then see where the new stuff is happening, and you can see that lots of the new reds are coming in at the top of their new respective groups, which is a real sign of the good work being done by plant breeders in recent years. And we'll go over them more one by one as we look at them in smaller graphs in subgroups. So here we have just got the yellow and pink lines, again yielding the bars, and in this case downy mildew resistance being shown in the dots. And then these are the new lines highlighted up. So KWS Telegram is the new highest yielding line, and Kushla is another new addition to the list, falling in the sort of the broad basket of similar yields in the middle. Then looking at powdery mildew resistance, the following 3 lines have breeder reported highly resistance to powdery mildew, being Marla, Belair and LG Ajax. Proteins in the yellows as well, there's quite a range, but obviously compared to the beans, peas are of lower protein, so these numbers trend around 22 rather than trending around 26. But would note that the pink pea flamingo is slightly higher, being more of a 23. I would also just say with the yellows in general, we do have lines that are more downy mildew resistance than others, with LG Corvette having the rating of an 8, and then there being several lines with the downy mildew level of 7. And after LG KD with Telegram, the new line, we have quite a group of similarly high yielding lines afterwards, which are still very good high yielding options. Moving on to the greens, maples and Marifats. So we've just about squeezed these on together. And again, we have got yield highlighted up in the bars and downy mildew resistance shown in the dots. So we've got quite a range of greens from KWS Arkham down to Prophet. We've got Mantara and Rose in the maples, and then we have the Marifats over there in the teal. So highlighting up the new lines, obviously KWS Arkham has done very well and as a candidate, and has come in at the top of the green list yield-wise. Then that is then followed by the recent line Pangea, and then Mika, the new line Bullet, and KWS Gotham all have the same yield and are sort of joint third on the list in a sort of a general high yielding group altogether. Downy mildew across the greens. We've got lots of lines that have got a score of 7, but Carrington and Blue Time really standing out as having good downy mildew resistance within the greens. The maples also tend to have very good downy mildew scores. That's been bred into them for a long time. Downy mildew resistance tends to be less good in the Marifats. We've got several 4s there, but we'd point out that Vision stands out as having a 7, and then we also then have a couple of 6s, including the new line nicks. Dots have now shifted to maturity, and I would just highlight that again, we have a range of maturities available with some of the KWS lines being later in maturity, including that new line Arkham at the front and KWS Gotham. And then also you have Butterfly, Daytona and Rose standing out as earlier lines. Obviously, there's some sort of rounding and stats done to generate these numbers. I might say that Butterfly is slightly earlier than Daytona. It does tend to be a very early line, as is Rose, but they do form a sort of an earlier group altogether there. Proteins, again, just to glance over those for the greens and Marifats. You have quite a range, though again I would note that the maples are quite good for protein, and that there is quite a range within the Marifats if that is really what you're targeting. Powdery information from breeders would highlight up Pangea, Aviator and Reacher. And last year we added to the list, and have then continuing to do so, breeder reported information on virus resistance. So this isn't from tests done by PGRO, but when breeders have claims about viruses, we are now sort of making them available for people to look at, where we have these lines highlighted up, 2 with bean yellow mosaic virus, and 2 with pea seed-borne mosaic virus, and 1 with pea nation mosaic virus resistance. So we're just going to slide back to the sort of the general views of the greens and Marifats for a second to just kind of review that. Again, highlighting up the new ones, that we have Arkham there as an incredibly high yielding line, Bullet in the main group, and LG Mamba looking very similar to LG Aviator, also by Limogran, being their sort of potential successor to that, and Yoshi standing out as a new joint top yielding Marifat, and Nix from Elsams being effectively a new iteration on what they've been doing with Vision. I'd say in general with the Marifats that there has been a real push in recent years on expanding the number of Marifats. We used to only have a couple on the list, and there's been really good work done by several plant breeders of really pushing those Marifat yields to be much more similar to the green yields are in general. And so when they've got that quality premium, they can be very good. In general, the processing industry is still looking at all of these new Marifat lines and assessing which ones meet their needs, because Marifats have really specific quality needs that really suit the processors. So just back to then looking at the P list in general. I can't fit it all on the screen with this without making it look tiny, but this is what is available on the site. You have information on who the agent is for each of these lines, if you want to get in touch with them. The yield, maturity and disease information shown, but also some information on standing ability, which doesn't tend to vary lots, but it is still covered what variation has been seen, and things like straw length from 1,000 seed weight, which would encourage people to look up for further consideration. Speaking of looking up things for further consideration, on the online version of the list, you can also, for each of these crops, go into a season by season breakdown of exactly how many trials they've been in and exactly what their performance has been over those years. This lets you look a bit more in detail into how they've been in different seasons, or in different seasons obviously have had very different weather conditions, and you can also then look at to what extent they have been doing really consistently based on varying weather how consistently they performed in different weather conditions, and or versus having high highs in certain years where they've really thrived in certain conditions. Particularly the plant breeders always look at this sort of breakdown, and I would encourage interested growers to consider looking at this on our website as well. So in general, just looking at sort of the list availability, it's available now as of this morning to download from the PGRO website, and you can both download the PDF, which is just a straight copy of what's in the magazine, and also look at the online version that has that greater breakdown between seasons and various tabs to just tab between, and the ability to sort of sort and filter things to really help tease through what you're looking for. I would say that it's now going to be out in the winter magazine itself as well, and would just promote that we have just merged our two magazines of Pulse and Vegetable to be a joint magazine, which will now also include the Vining Bee Descriptive List and extra information on vining bees. This is in part done because a lot of the main issues, such as issues with viruses and issues with diseases and issues with legal products, often apply across both crops. So we felt that merging the magazines would provide save repeating very similar articles and provide a better, larger reader experience. This webinar itself is being recorded and will be live available on the website for re-watching afterwards. And we've also recorded a podcast of me talking to Ben on Inside the Pod, going over a more conversational chat about all of these new lines. So I'm aware it's a very sort of a quick whistle-stop tour over half an hour over the new list editions. I will be available to take any questions in the chat from anyone who has anything they want to say about things. Roger Vickers, our CEO, will also be available if there is specific questions that more deal with his specialities. But otherwise, I hope people have just enjoyed this sort of quick whistle-stop run-through of what new lines are on the list and what the lists look like after recent withdrawals, and would encourage people to take a detailed look on the website and in the new magazine for full details of what's gone on. So thank you very much in general for listening, where some people may drift off now, but if we have any questions on the Q&A, I will try to get them up and deal with them as soon as we can. Obviously, certain questions may require extra information being checked and looked up, but if so, we'll get back to anyone with those questions as soon as possible. Thank you very much, and I'll hang around and see if anything comes through in on the Q&A. So we have a question here from Andrew Wilson saying, what soil type are the varieties of the list grown on? And saying that the ability to cope with wet feet or very dry conditions affects resilience and yield massively. So I had this map at the start of the talk, which I will slide back to now, and hopefully you can just see that we do try to target having quite a wide range of soil types across the country. You can see that some of these regions have more clays, some have slightly lighter soils, some being more mediums. We don't obviously have every possible range of soil variation, but we do try and have a spread of soil types when selecting sites, and also the different regions of the country, particularly in this last year, had very variable amounts of rainfall. So in this last season, a lot of the centre of the country had real strong drought conditions in the spring, whereas the sort of the locations down in Kent and some of the more northern locations had just had a few more rainstorms in that sort of May, early April period, and they had low water rather than really low water this season. Though obviously this is also the reason that we have this 5-year data set, that whilst 2025 is a year that you would associate with stress and drought, 24 was actually quite wet in the spring in comparison. So this is also one of the reasons to then look at that. We don't show a site-by-site breakdown unless you're really interested and want to drill into things with us more precisely. But that year-on-year breakdown can kind of show varieties that have thrived more in different years than others. So as we know, we've had certain years being drier or hotter or wetter and cooler, you can sometimes tease out by looking at that year by year breakdown varieties that have suited certain years more than others. And you can find some others that just, no matter what, they've done 111 each season, hot or dry, and others that have had poorer and worse seasons in general. So I would encourage, if you're really interested in that, to have a look at that consistency breakdown. And if you're really interested in your specific soil type, on our website, you can go into the yearly data by site. You may need to talk to us about what the site codes are where. If you really want to look at the location closest to you, we should be able to help with that. See, there's some new posts, so I'll just hit refresh. So from Nigel Davies, we've got a message saying that currently getting tundra for wet protein extraction, what would be compatible with tundra, but with a higher protein percentage. So if I slide back over into the winter bean protein slide, so here we've got tundra protein level of 26. I would say in general, most winter beans have got a similar protein percentage, but often have a bit of a higher yield than tundra. So you could make the call to go to one of the higher yielding lines with a slightly higher protein, such as Vincent having that 26.5, or you could really look at the two lines that are more hitting 27% protein. It really depends on what you'd be targeting in your system. But I think either decision there, again, we're not promoting specific varieties, could be a sensible thing to do. Maybe keep an area of tundra and try a couple of the others and compare how well they work for you. So yeah, if I will stop sharing and the event, and I'd like to just thank everyone again for attending and encourage people to get in touch if they have anything else they want to discuss with me, and encourage people to download the full list, which is now live on the website, and obviously seek out the articles and associated commentary in the magazine as well. So yes, thank you very much everyone who's still here, and do get in touch if there's anything else you would like. Thanks to Ben for helping set and run the meeting, and yeah, I think we'll draw that to a close. Thank you very much.